Hey, this week on the 167, we talk smoke and mirrors and the book of Ecclesiastes. Welcome to the 167. Hey, welcome back to the 167. I am here with Pastor Rick George.
I was just thinking, is it awkward that you introduce me every single podcast?
No.
It's like, does that seem weird?
Well,
it's nobody.
It's for our.
Point?
If you catch us on YouTube, you could actually see who's here.
Oh,
but if you're listening to us on Spotify or one of your other podcast app, I always like to tell them who's in the room.
I get it. So there's people like, I kind of recognize that voice. Who is it?
Who is that sultry voice?
So we have to say up front who it is.
Yeah,
I get it
exactly.
Now. Yeah, I'm kind of new to the whole podcast world. It is great to be here.
New to the podcast world. Listen, we just, I think it was 2 weeks ago, did a full year.
And we didn't have like some big confetti cannon launch celebration.
That's
with
a
that?
failure right there.
Yeah,
I know.
Way to go.
It kind of
podcast.
snuck up on me because we pre-recorded our first 6 episodes. So technically that won't be true till 2 more episodes. At 2 more episodes, we'll have a confetti cannon.
Okay.
Or we'll make the noise that it sounds like we did a confetti cannon for those of us that are just audio listeners.
Okay. Whatever.
And to celebrate it, can we bring in everybody who's ever been on the podcast and have them around the table at
Yes,
one
we
time?
can, but hold on.
What is this, an episode of the Muppets?
You can't talk yet. You haven't been introduced.
Oh, I can't.
Nobody knows who you are at this point. They're
If
like,
you don't
who is that
recognize,
voice?
if you don't recognize that voice, that is the Nick Magana.
Yeah.
The Nick Magana.
The Nick Magana, children's pastor extraordinaire.
There you go.
And you're our senior pastor / head chef. Do we just make up things every time?
The dude with the food. Bam.
Nick Magana, children's pastor /
I don't know.
professional egg hider.
Professional egg hider and clue maker upper.
There you go. Our Riddler, our clue master.
The Riddler.
And as always, I am Pastor Lucas Motley, who is the cruise ship director here at New Life Community
There you
Church.
go.
So today we're going to be talking about smoke and mirrors.
Yes, we are.
I thought we were Hevel.
Hevel.
I thought we could have brought in the little mist machine and just like fogged the whole room.
Yeah, that would have been fun.
You can't really hear that on the radio though. All right,
Are we on the radio or just
We're on the radio
podcast?
too. Wow,
Yes,
we are.
Wow.
you actually are. You're on Pandora Radio.
You are international.
Yes. We have a
radio personality, Rick
This
George.
thing escalated quickly. Went from a small podcast to an international radio ministry.
Syndication.
Yeah, syndication. Yeah.
I didn't tell you guys, like Rush Limbaugh retired, Dan Bongino took his spot. I think he got fired, and we just picked up that spot.
Yeah.
It's the most
look at that.
nationally
Sweet.
recognized.
Boom.
I'm just kidding.
Anyway,
So we're in the book of Ecclesiastes
we are
on Sunday morning.
Well,
It's
we're
very
not
uplifting.
actually in it, but
I'm in it, like my name's in it. No, I'm kidding. So we are decided to study Ecclesiastes on Sunday morning, and you talked about 2 phrases quite a bit this weekend, and I want to just get a quick recap on those 2 phrases. One was under the sun.
Yep.
You kind of pointed out that occurs over and over and over in Ecclesiastes. Why is that important?
It's important because it sets the stage or helps us understand the perspective in which the teacher or Solomon is teaching from. And we'll dig deeper into it this week in chapter 2. But this under the sun is not like, oh, we're outside and the sun's shining and we're enjoying life. It's all of life from an earthly perspective. Without an eternal perspective, it's just simply our life here, now, under the sun. And he wants to make it very clear that there are 2 different ways to view life, and the perspective that he's coming from through the vast majority of this book is just from an earthly perspective, under the sun.
Under the sun, getting sunburns for all the pale kids.
Yep.
Is that like we look to the sun?
Oh, we look to the
sun.
That was
Well
nice.
timed.
Yes.
Well, we have a lot of practice about that around the office.
We should sing that song,
Uh,
or not.
or not.
Yeah, go ahead.
We just did sing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, under the sun, it's our earthly existence. It's what we have in these bodies.
Exactly.
And so the other one was Hevel.
Hevel, which is the end result of just pursuing life under the sun. It's temporary. It's fleeting. It's what the author says is meaningless or pointless or vanity. It's this life that it looks like something. Again, I talked about how it's conveys the idea of trying to grab a hold of smoke or a vapor. You can see it. It's something. It's there, like it's visible, but you can't grab it. It's like you try to grab it and then it's not there. That's what all that this life puts in front of us that says, oh, if you do this, you'll be happy. And we grab after it, and then we realize, no, I didn't get anything.
Well, and when you were talking about it, it was kind of funny because I was with you when you were like, it's vapor. And I'm like, yeah, I can see the vapor. But then you also added the flavor of it that it's also an enigma, that it has this mysterious feature. And then I was like, it's close-up magic.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what happened there? I don't understand. I thought I got it, but now I don't get it. I
thought it was an egg, and then it was a bird, and there was a little poof of smoke.
Yeah, and then it's gone.
And it's like, in my pocket.
Yeah,
Stop doing that, David Blaine.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, where did all this stuff come from? And we think we have life figured out as people. Like we have this plan. We have a 10-year master plan for our life, and we're going to do this and that, and we're going to accomplish these goals, and we're going to achieve a certain level of success, and we're going to have meaning in life, and it's all going to be glorious. And it just seems empty. And we thought we had it. We saw it. It was like the vapor, the smoke. But then when we grabbed it, nope, it wasn't there at all.
Yeah. Well,
it's mysterious. It's really hard to explain.
Yeah. And there are so many times like that in our lives, like you said, like where we think that we understand something and we turn the corner and we're like, oh, I didn't get that at all.
Yeah. So I didn't go too deep into it, but like you try to explain like my podium that I preach from. It's like, well, what is this? Well, yeah, it's it's some plastic or, some molded material that, but as you dig deeper into it, it's like, no, that's not what it is really at all.
Right.
It's a lot of nothing, made up of some little things that really are not much of anything at all. It's like, I don't understand. It's complicated.
Oh, yeah. I read that article one time where it talks about that. In your science book, it shows you the nucleus of an atom and then an electron that's rotating in the outer atmosphere, this thing, and that kind of creates the boundaries. But they said that to get the scale of that is if you took a pinprick, that the exterior electrons would be 3 football fields away from the nucleus. That's how much nothing is in an atom. Yeah. And like you said, you can still touch it, taste it.
When you put enough of the nothings together, it's something.
Yeah.
Explain that. I don't know.
And what keeps them together?
If you want to understand it all, just watch Ant-Man.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, quantum realm. Absolutely.
Yeah, whatever. I don't even know what that is.
Explains it all.
Movie reference.
Yeah, I don't know what that
He's
movie
a
is.
Marvel superhero that talks to ants
Okay.
and becomes very
Sounds
small,
very intriguing.
And can make himself very small.
like an ant.
Yeah, love it. Whatever.
It's meaningless under the sun is really what you're saying.
You know what that is?
That is Hevel.
It's Hevel. It's Hevel.
So here's my real question is, I feel like sometimes you talk about this, or not you particular, but people talk about this, and it kind of feels weird because, we come out as Christians a lot of times and say, well, we find our purpose in God. You can't find purpose without God. And yet we see lots of people like the teacher Solomon is seeing all these people.
Right.
They work, they put their worth in, who they are, their physical appearance. So it's like, why can't I find my purpose in under the sun? Why can't I find meaning and direction? Can I not find meaning as a father or, doing good work?
That's Hevel. It's an enigma. It's kind of hard to explain. It's hard to understand. So yes, you can, a little bit. There's a level of meaningfulness, and this week you got to tune in. You got to show up this Sunday as we kind of dive deeper into chapter 2, and I start to unpack that a little bit. That Solomon goes on this deep dive into all the things the world offers, and has a pretty good time. It's like there's some pretty cool things. that he enjoys a lot that this world offers, just like many of us have and many people still do. Scripture says that, that sin is fun for a moment, but then it catches up to you. And so the same thing with, this life under the sun. There are all kinds of things that you can do, and it will bring a certain level of satisfaction to your life or my life. But again, long term, it's Hevel. Like it's fleeting. It was there. I thought I was going to be ultimately happy, but no, it was just like, I had a great weekend, but then I had to go back to work on Monday, and my life still is in the gutter. It's still terrible, even though I thought I had a great time on the weekend.
So what are some of those things? Like, I know you're going to unpack that a little bit this week, but just to spin around the group, what are some of those things that maybe we struggle with that competes for our purpose, that competes for that top title, that we kind of deceive ourselves? The more that you keep saying, it's explaining Hevel, I'm almost picture like a hologram. It looks like it, and then, or a mirage, and it's it looks like it, you get there, you touch it, and it's gone.
Yeah, when you said that, side note, you can push pause, whatever, check out for a minute. But I just heard that there is a divorce that is a pretty well-known divorce. There's a guy in Japan who is filing divorce for his hologram wife. So he got married a couple of years ago to a hologram.
Excellent.
And
you have my undivided
I know.
attention.
Sounds like a fulfilling marriage.
Yes. So talk about craziness in the world.
Do not pause.
Yes,
Stay tuned to this.
And so he has been in this long-term relationship with a hologram through his computer. So it's an all animated, relationship. And he's seeking a divorce, and I'm sure some kind of a settlement, because the company who provided the software and all the technology for the hologram interactions, so you could actually create this hologram and then interact with it, is gone bankrupt. And so they no longer support
Issue
the
an update.
software. And so now he can't communicate with his wife. And so he wants a divorce. And
he's suing his hologram wife
well, yeah. So I'm like,
for child support.
what in the world is going on? Hevel. It's Hevel. It's kind of hard to explain. What was your question?
Where are we at again?
That's a great example. I asked for an example of things that are like that are, mirages and that we think we gain purpose from. That's incredible.
That's it. I know. So that was where my mind went, that here's a person who thought that they could find meaning, some kind of value in their life because of a hologram figure that they fell in love with on a computer screen, and have been in a long-term relationship with this.
Alexa, assume physical form.
So there you go. It's not made up.
Well, for the non-eccentric billionaires.
When I was listening to you on Sunday, the first thing that kind of popped into my mind when I was thinking about this, especially with, you think about Americans, and you were talking about, great grandparents and how many people remembered them.
Yeah.
And the buzzword that's out there now of how many people are wanting to create legacy.
Yeah.
That it's all about legacy, but it's Hevel. I've gone around and I've been asking people ever since you said that, hey, what are the names of your great grandparents? I have not been able to find a single person that can tell me the name of one great grandparent. And some of the people, their grandparents probably had a great legacy.
Yeah, I think in all three services, the largest service, the 10 a.m. service, had 5 people that stood up that said that they could name their great grandfathers. 5 out of a couple of hundred, I don't know how many, 300-400 people. We had however many people were at church total, adults, and there were 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think 10 people total out of all the hundreds that were here that knew the names of their grandfathers.
Well, and that's
there's no legacy. You think you're doing something because it's there, and it's Hevel.
But even that, like you were saying, it's just a name. like I said, I told you that, like, I knew the names of mine because we would visit graveyards.
Yeah.
Like, we would go on Memorial Day, we would go on their birthdays, things like that, and drop flowers off at their graves with my grandma, and so I was like, so I knew who they were. Doesn't mean I met them. Doesn't mean that
Right.
they've impacted my life. But you're even seeing that trend now where you have people who are, who do have legacies, founding fathers, MLK. And what people are doing is they're going back and retroactively finding a flaw in them, in their personality, their characteristics, how
yeah.
they're doing, and they're negating their legacy because of, a personal flaw or something like that.
Yeah, so kind of circling back around, you can find a level of meaning in life, and there are people like we have friends. I know people who, some of their like their great grandparents established like a scholarship fund. They put money in their investments and then dedicated that to help educate their grandchildren, which is great. So now you've got great grandchildren who are like, yes, I get to go to college. Oh, how? Well, it's a family, trust or whatever. My great grandparents. Well, who are they? I don't really know their name. I just know that it was established. So the legacy, like the result, kind of lives on, but you and what you like, I don't know. It's like kind of some money's going on, but did it really make a difference? And it's just it's a weird. It's an enigma.
Well, and I don't know if it's the same for men and women. I think men especially feel that pull for legacy and that to live on through that. Like you mentioned, kids in sports, where you said like, let's not kid ourselves. That's about us to a certain extent.
Yeah.
And I think it is in sports and academics. Is this in some way reflects that I am being a good parent?
Right.
In some way, it brings honor to our family name.
Right. And so you can find meaning, a level of meaning in life by being a mother, father, seeing your kids succeed. And it's like, yes, it's fulfilling, but it's so temporary and it's so fragile. And it's just, you can't hang on to it because it's an enigma kind of, it's that Hevel in that it's a vapor that when you try to grab it or you try to latch on to this success that you had as a father or in business, it's like boom, it's so short term.
And you see that in Glory Day talk, where it's like you got the guys sitting around going, we won the championship game, and or like I was in, I went to Harvard, like it's always there was a time in my life where I was successful and I found real purpose and identity in that. And now I'm past that and I don't know what to do with myself because that's no longer the pinnacle of my identity.
So it's just it's fleeting.
Mm-hmm. So on the flip side of that, where we always as Christ followers usually tell people that, you can't find your identity, you can't find purpose in things, and people try it, because they get that temporary feeling. On the flip side of that, we tell them the thing that you can find your purpose in is God. And so I just wrote down, what is that purpose, and is it the same for everybody? Like if I say to somebody, you can find your purpose in God, what am I actually telling them?
You're telling them that ultimately the things of this life are temporary, the things of eternity are eternal, like they're lasting. And so you find your ultimate purpose, your lasting purpose in knowing and worshiping God, right? Honoring Him, glorifying Him through your obedience to His word. So yes, in general, it's the same for every person. But then that's where it kind of gets broken into your specific giftings and how God chooses to use you. And so you might honor God, through living out this particular thing in life, and I might honor God by living out a different path, but it's still honoring God and using the gifts that He has given you. So ultimately, it is true meaning and purpose is found in knowing God, serving God, worshiping God, honoring God, and being obedient to the Word of God, and the fulfilling of the giftings of God that He's given you. Right? And so all of those are eternal. All of those have their roots in God and then ultimately go back to eternity, not all the temporary things here.
So when you think about that, I'm going to spring this question on you. When you think about that, what do you think is one of your things that you personally in your life, you would say, oh, this is universal. Like I'm tapped into this eternal part of God. This is universally what my purpose is, versus what is something that you think that God has specifically called you to be with your purpose? Like Pastor Nick, what would you say about that?
On the universal side, I think, and this is where you get the collision of that humanness and things we want, that we chase after, but sometimes we chase after in the wrong way. I think we are called as parents to raise our children and to take pride in parenting, but it's in the parenting to teach your children to honor and love God. It's not necessarily in your kid being the smartest, the best athlete, or the things that we value as, from the world's perspective. And I think that's universal. I mean, God calls everyone to do that with their children. So I think that's a universal thing that I'm called to. But like on the specific side, it's not every person that's called to be in children's ministry. Like that's a very specific call with a specific skill set that, God gifted me with. It takes a lot of patience. It takes, a different personality, a different look on the world. And am I saying that like I'm this special and unique, the only one that can do it? No, but there is a different calling in there, and on the flip side, like, do I think that God's calling me to be a senior pastor? No, I don't see that ever being my calling. Now I could be proven wrong later in life, but
You can go to a different season.
I could go to a different season, but right now I don't see that ever as being something I want. I will leave that to you.
Yeah,
You can
there you
bear the weight of that burden.
Which also requires a special temperament and skill set.
So along with that, another kind of general is to go into all the world and make disciples.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of our purpose in life. That's what God has called everyone to do, to spread the gospel. But specifically, he's called some people to be evangelists, and he's called some people to be missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
So there are people who take that generality of, I need to tell people about Jesus, and it's very specific in, I'm going to go to this foreign country, I'm going to this particular people group with this organization, and I'm going to live as a missionary in this country. Like, that is way different. It's way more dialed in than just the general purpose of spreading the gospel, teaching people about Jesus. Right? So that's another like general and then more specific.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's you talk about that where it's like some are you called to be evangelists, some prophet, like all the kind of stuff. And it's like all of that pushes everyone towards the goal of, like you said, spreading the gospel. Because I've just seen people do that where they're like, well, I'm not an evangelist. I'm like, well, it doesn't mean you don't have to evangelize.
So you can never fully understand your purpose in life if you don't know God, worship God, tell other people about God.
Yeah.
You're missing out like that. You're like, I don't know my purpose. Well, just start there because that's a huge part
And
of
some
your
of that
purpose.
stuff is going to rise to the top,
Yep.
And so I agree with that. And I think that, like our general purpose is, what we say at New Life, love God, love people, and then in there, you're going to find some really specific areas that you are called to, that you say, man, I always use the example of, VBS when we do that place test that we do here where it's like it helps you find your spiritual gifts and the way God's made you. Shout out to Place Test. If you want to take that, let me know. Lucas at newlifegardener.com. I'll mail you. It's a really cool online assessment. But I always use that in the class to talk about one of the guys that came through. And then, like a Jenny Boutels, who, in that test, a lot of times people will go, oh, what are you passionate about? She's like, children's ministry. And it's like, great, we'll put you as a Kids World, small group leader. Oh, no, that's terrifying. And it's like, well, what do you like to do? I like to make set design. Oh, well, perfect.
Yeah, right. 100%.
We'll have you do set design for VBS and for Kids World, and it's like you can be passionate about kids and minister to kids, and yet never speak to a child.
Right.
Oh, 100%. Because I have people that come up to me all the time, they're like, "Oh, you couldn't use me in children's ministry because I don't like kids or kids don't like me." I'm like, I don't care about that. What are you good at?
Yeah.
Because there's a place for everybody within God's kingdom, and like children's ministry is just a small microcosm of the rest of the church. like, I have a place for anybody. You don't
Yeah.
have to even ever interact with a child.
Here we go. Shameless plug for children's ministry.
100%.
You know, like you need people who like speak and teach, you know, for
Yep.
the lessons. You need people like we have lots of great teen helpers, 5th and 6th graders that are in there, or high school kids that are in there. We need people just to basically wrangle teenagers. Teens are great with kids, but they're teenagers, you know.
Love our student volunteers, but you have to have a volunteer watching the student volunteer sometimes.
Right.
I mean,
And so, I mean, like those are those things where it's like, well, I gravitate more towards junior. We can still use you in children's ministry to kind of motivate the other
yeah, we still
volunteers.
We need tech people. We need security people. I mean, we need all the things.
Absolutely.
And if you want to volunteer, you can go to newlifegardener.com/volunteer.
Or just come find Pastor Nick. I'll be
Or
happy
come
to.
find
Are we
Pastor Nick.
entitling this podcast hashtag shameless plug?
We should have had a counter, like a little meter on the side where it's like ping, like how many shameless plugs. So, last question. So, you talked about our expectations of God might be faulty.
Yeah.
How do I know if my expectations of God are faulty, or should I be expectant of something?
Well, do they line up with what the Bible says? Is kind of the.
But how would I know what the Bible says, Pastor Rick?
So as you read and you dig in and you're like, this is God, this is his character, these are his attributes, and this is the pattern that he has established throughout time of how he interacts with people, and if what you're expecting God to do in your life does not line up with what he has already established, you should at least pause and consider, is this accurate? Like, is this something, like, is there an example, in Scripture that would support this idea that all I have to do is tell God, this is what I want, and he's going to do it? Is there, like, is that the pattern? Is that what he's established? And, is there a pattern in there that says, if I come before God in humility and say, God, I just need you, is there a pattern that says, well, when you do that, he will make himself known to you? Well, those are how you can figure that out. You just dig in and see what he's already established.
Yeah, I'll say I would think that my expectations of God are usually faulty when I find myself measuring God by a standard that I establish. It's a measuring stick that I've set up and said, well, God, if you don't hit this mark, well, then you're at fault with what's going on here. When it's not a measuring stick that God ever set up. Because usually God's way is way different than what my way is. And like you said, a lot of times his answer is probably going to be, a lot of times is no. And it doesn't mean that he failed. It means that my expectation failed. That I was trying to set up a new standard for God outside of what his standard is.
Yeah, so just to clarify there, in my mind, what I was trying to say, and couple that with what you just said, is that, the way it works is God created man and then wants us to glorify him in the way we do things. What we tend to do is man creates God and expects God to then glorify them in the way that he does things. So we flip it upside down, and the God that we have created in our mind is not the God of the Bible. It's a God that just does everything that we want him to do for us.
Yeah, it's flipping the model of, well, I understand my father God because of my earthly father, rather than going, God the Father is the standard for my earthly father.
Yep.
Well, guys, thanks for joining us here in the 167. We're going to get into more of this next week as we continue to explore Ecclesiastes. We'll see you next time here on the
And I
167.
can't wait for the confetti cannons in a couple of weeks.
Confetti cannons.
Make sure you're here for that.
Volunteer for children's ministry.
Hashtag
See you later.
shameless plug.
Hey, welcome to 7 Minute Stories here on the 167, and I'm here with Austin and Alexa Becker. Is it still weird?
It still is a little weird.
Newlyweds. How long has it been now?
It's been a little over 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, September.
Your wedding is famous because it was the first time, and I've actually now, when I do weddings, I always ask people, like, oh, do you want a unity candle? Do you want a braid rope? And then I'm like, do you want to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? And they're like, what? So that was the first wedding I've ever done. It was your guys' wedding that was the unity symbol was, and I had to write a devotion that was like, just as the peanut butter smooshes with the jelly.
Mm-hmm.
So do you guys still feel like you are that smushed peanut butter and jelly sandwich?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. After being together for 6 years, you know,
Who's the jelly and who's the peanut butter?
Peanut butter.
peanut butter.
Yeah, I think
I'd-
so.
Yeah, I'd
You're the
agree.
jelly?
I'd agree
Yeah.
with that.
I can see that. So, like I said, you guys have been together for a long time, 6 years, and in that 6 years, you kind of came back to Christ. You kind of rediscovered your faith. So, talk to me a little bit about did your relationship change from kind of one step to the next, or I know that happened at the same time that you were getting married, so there's lots of change that's happening. What was kind of the before and after?
I feel like the before is just we were still growing up. We're both pretty young right now. But just growing up and not necessarily doing the right things. And so I feel like just going to church, we started doing the right things, and noticing what we've been doing isn't the way that we still want to do things. And I feel like just finding that better community really pushed us together. And it also challenged us because we were figuring out, how we wanted to kind of take these new characteristics and, yeah, figure that out together and do that together.
Yeah, I definitely felt like we had built our whole relationship around, something that I like how Mike said it the most. Like, you have an idol right here, and you build your life around it. And we built it around the wrong things, and so all of our friend group was all around the wrong things. So now we kind of tossed out that idol, got rid of those friends, and now it's now it's God, and then we have great friends now around that idol. So, and they all have same goals as us, and so that's how it definitely was, I feel like.
Yeah, it's amazing, like you said, that changing your community, how that changes your activities. It changes the health, emotional health, because you feel like you can go to somebody, those kind of things. What has been the biggest shocker being newlyweds? Like, what was the thing that you didn't anticipate?
How much laundry there is.
Are you doing the laundry?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he actually does the laundry. I usually fold it, but he likes doing the laundry.
See, it's the folding thing that's intimidating, because like everybody wants their stuff folded different ways. So you either have to learn it or you just like, you fold it.
Austin's folding is shoving it in the drawer as far as he can. So there's not much technique to it.
Although there is a technique in getting the washer just right. So that's my job. You gotta,
So it doesn't shrink your clothes. And
Well, I do have a pair of pants that are a little shorter than they were before, but that's all right.
working out the kinks.
forgiveness. It's
Yeah,
fine.
yeah.
So I actually just gave this advice to a couple that's going to get married. I was like, go king size. Like the king size bed is the ticket. Are you? You're nodding along.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, we actually just had this conversation where I was like, Austin, I'm getting really tired of you sleeping next to me. I would love to kick you to the bed, but I love laying diagonal. There's something about taking the entire bed that I just love. So I've had to readjust that a little bit.
Have you ever seen the memes on Instagram where it's like her side and it's like this much and it's his side?
Yes.
That's her, and that's just because she lays diagonal.
It's just my feet. My feet are just taking up
And
the
she
space.
steals all the covers. So
See, for Carissa and I, she always wants to cuddle, and then she's like, now I'm hot, and I banish you to the far reaches of the edge of the bed.
Mm-hmm.
So, talk to me a little bit about, we were just talking before this about kind of some of the misnomers that people have. It's like, oh, well, when I'm a good Christ follower and I get married, like, we, sit in our two twin beds by each other and read the Bible to each other at night, because that's my devotion. What do you guys actually do to stay active in your faith as a couple?
I would say, so we're both in the same life group. So we have roughly around 3-ish hours a week of homework that we do, and that could be podcasts, YouTube videos, whatever, from various people. And so we'll do those. We actually do them completely separate. We're not like, let's get cuddled up and listen to it together. Like, I'm
Just cuddle up and listen to Chuck Missler.
no, not the case. I have a dedicated space in the basement. It sounds bad, but it's where I work. It's my office also, and it brings me a lot of peace to be in there and doing my homework there alone and not have any distractions. Plus, she may think something is important that I don't think is as important or worth writing down. So then you have different pause points and everything. So she'll usually do it up in our room or in the living room, and then I do it in the basement.
Then you come back together and compare notes.
Yeah, we tend to do, and at our life groups, we obviously get to hear each other and what we wrote down. But we also just thought it was really important to keep our faith individual and then bring it together and talk about that as a couple, because I want to grow in my own faith and figure out what I truly believe, and it's not always going to be what he believes, but I don't want to ever take that away or have him kind of control my thoughts or I control his thoughts. So yeah, we definitely do that separately, and then
It can be a tricky thing, especially like I said, in marriages, but also like with child and parent relationships too, where people struggle with that, where it's like, well, this is what my mom and dad say, so I'm just going to go along and to get along, and that's what I believe. Versus like in marriage, like you challenge each other. It's like, oh, I can see where you're coming from there, but here's what I'm thinking. You're like, oh yeah, that's good too.
for sure.
Yeah, we definitely had those discussions with each other, because some of the podcasts we listen to, sometimes they have some challenging topics of, various different things. But, if she comes to me and she's like, I really didn't like how he said this. And, she took it one way, but I maybe took it the other. So I give her like kind of my interpretation of it, and not to persuade her like, oh, my interpretation's right, just so she can get a different view on it. And sometimes that helps her. And then sometimes she's like, I don't know about your interpretation either.
Yeah. I always tell people a lot of times, my brother has a phrase where he says, you have to eat the fish and leave the bones. Like, so you could listen to a podcast and be like, I agreed with this, this, and this. I don't really like that. Toss the bones.
Yeah, that was hard for me to do. I kind of like to nitpick things, but yeah.
She'd hear that
like
one
point
thing.
by point.
She'd hear that one thing, like, mid fish, and she couldn't just throw away the bone. She's like, I'm going to throw away the rest of it.
The whole thing is bad.
The whole thing. Yeah. I would also say that we had a really hard time talking about our feelings with, with being Christians and with getting kind of this new idea of God. I feel like we felt kind of embarrassed to talk to each other about it, which is so weird to us because we can tell each other literally anything, the weird stuff. But this was just something that was really hard to talk about, and since then we've gotten a lot better about it. But I don't know. I don't know if how every couple feels that way, but I don't know. It was just something that we struggled with at the beginning for sure.
Well, I think a lot of times there's not a lot of context for that. Like you watch rom-coms, you watch culture, and so you very much know, you learn how to flirt, you learn how to sort of being in a relationship by watching other people do it. But those are intimate conversations, and it's like not a lot of times are you watching a show and they're like, today I was listening to a podcast about Jesus, and it's like you don't have a lot of models for that. And so I think it can be very awkward for couples to start talking about their faith.
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, it took me so long just to get comfortable with saying the word God or Jesus openly, just because I was just like, ooh, like it was
sacrilegious.
Almost just cringy, and so it was hard to talk with her about it, especially because I feel like since I got to New Life and where I'm at, even now, is just such a 720. Like it's so different where now it's like I'm singing along in church and we're talking about podcasts and I'm talking to the Holy Spirit, like all this stuff. And it's so different. And yeah, so at the beginning, it was hard to talk about, but now it's just like the one thing that we do together is whenever we're in our room, we actually have our Bibles on our bedside tables. And so we'll read those together because one of the first podcasts we actually listened to was Derek Prince. And he had said that if someone who hasn't read the Bible, he would say read John, Acts, and then like Romans or Ephesians. He said you can change out Romans for Ephesians if you wanted to. And so we did. I got through John and Acts, and I think she did as well. And then she actually read Ephesians while we were in Arkansas. So she's a little ahead of me now, I must say. But
we're both a little competitive as well. So one person brings out the Bible to bed, and then the other person has to. It's like, oh, man.
She does it for 15. I got to do it for 15 and a half.
Oh, man. Well, that's good. It's a good thing to kind of bring in there. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for sharing that. I think that's going to bless people because, like I said, I think couples out there, like you said, I think that sometimes they feel awkward about it. So I think your journey is going to bless people, and thanks for sharing it.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you guys next time on the 7-Minute Story. If you enjoyed this episode of the 167, make sure you like, subscribe, follow, get notified, leave a 5-star rating and a positive review. Tell all your friends to listen as well. Make sure you go over to newlifegardener.com and check out all that we have to offer as a church, and check out our messages online as well. Thanks for listening.